Hello and welcome to a broadcast from LPAC TV, the third in a series of such broadcasts. My name is Matthew Ogden. In the studio we have Lyndon LaRouche, Diane Sayer, and Rachel Brown. And hooked up over video we have Summer Shields, Dave Christie, Keisha Rogers, and Bill Roberts. And I think without too much introduction, we can just get the conversation started here.
One point I think which should be emphasized, it's in the behavior of the organization. There's a tendency in terms of election campaigns to respond too quickly and with poor judgment, therefore, on how you think the voters are reacting to what's going on. Now, essentially, in terms of running a campaign, the voters really respond chaotically. They have no clarity in terms of what their intentions are. You have at least the last minute voting patterns, which are usually rather silly. And particularly now, look at the situation. You have the Republican candidates are all ridiculous, those that are still in. And I don't think anyone should wish to vote for them. And I wonder if they could pass a sanity test, if, in any case, if they did vote for any of these guys. In the Democratic column, you have a mysterious semi-possibility of a candidate, and you have what is running, the president so-called, who is worse than nothing. Because what's important is what's going to happen when you get down the line, where the decision actually has to be made. At present, these Republicans are confusing everything because none of them are worth anything. There's no one who's sane is actually going to vote for them, unless they've got a gun stuck in their ears or something. And the Democrats, the same thing. We do not have what we would consider a relevant candidate presently available in terms of the presidential election. And that's what's going to tend to determine everything. And the mistake was made that people were reacting too much to short-term reactions in the population. The population has nothing to vote for right now. And they're experimenting mentally with something they might think they might vote for. So don't get too serious about how people are reacting in reported polls on candidates and on, particularly on the lists, or in public opinion. Public opinion is not worth much. You can't count on it. It's fickle, extremely fickle, especially in this term when you have nothing worth voting for. What's going to happen in terms of getting a presidency, if it's not one of these fools, is uncertain. What we have to do is concentrate on what the issue is. For example, you know what I did in the presentation this past week? That's the way you've got to think. Don't think in terms of candidacy or who's likely to win. Because not any one of these candidates who are running for president, none of them are worth anything right now. Anyone who would vote for them has to be clinically insane because there's no value there. We're looking for a development which will create the possibility of none of the above emerging as one or two candidates somewhere along the line toward the presidential election. In the meantime, what we're concerned about, should be concerned about, is policy. I laid out this past week, I laid out exactly what the policy options are that I know that exist. And I haven't seen anything else to replace that. So don't worry about the usual thing, so-called, about who's going to win the election or who you should support and vote for. None of this thing means anything right now. You have nobody to elect. No one to elect now. No one to be, and the reactions of the public day by day, forget it. That's not the issue. When you get a reaction which is meaningful, you'll know you got it. But don't stab at somebody who looks like something who might be a good candidate or might be valuable in some other way. They're fickle. They don't know what they're voting for. They're totally unstable in their opinions. And so don't get involved. What our job is, it must be, is what I did this past Wednesday. That's the job. Each of us must take that course of action. We must present reality, harsh reality. What the public needs and what they will eventually vote for if they're sane, they're going to vote for reality. They're not going to vote for a candidate because they can't trust any candidate. Anyone who says they can trust voting for a candidate now, generally, is insane. or are just foolish. So the point is, the mistake that we saw being made was a tendency to be influenced by trends and shifting trends on popularity and popular opinion. Those things do not count right now. When you get somebody who's really alive, has a good opinion, you'll recognize it. But you won't vote for it on the lesser evil concept. Or this guy might make it, that guy might make it. We're going to have to go for getting exactly the policy we want, not some issues, but the full line. And that's where the error has to be corrected. Don't get stuck with partial good signs, possible signs. Don't count on it. We're now going to try to get a movement inside the population, or at least some part of the population, which sets movement in motion, not trying to get signs of immediate short-term approbation. So that's my caution. So have some fun.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because we were discussing earlier today that clearly the whole thing is an orchestration. Like, they boost someone in the polls, and then you found out he had sex with chickens or something, and then everyone gets demoralized. Or maybe it's a British depopulation plan, because everyone's going to look at the entire array of candidates and jump off a bridge, and by the time of the elections, there'll be no one left in the United States to vote, period. I mean, it really is astounding. You can't help but say this obviously is an attack on the American people, the entire array of candidates.
No, the point is elementary. The general population of the United States, the voters, have no conception in hell of what they should vote for or what they should put. They don't have the slightest conception. If they have good ideas on some issue, they don't understand what the whole thing is about. And it's like he may be a good driver, but he hasn't got, the windshield is all blackened out and he can't see where he's going. That's the sort of thing. So that's where we are, and we have to say that. We have to speak like that to the issue, because that's the fact. Don't try to make up some fact which is going to take the place of reality, which is what people often do in election campaigns. But now the very existence of civilization on this planet depends on decisions which are competent. And none of the candidates we see running for presidency, and most of the candidates we see running for office otherwise, really don't have a damn thing to say of any use in terms of the crisis that's facing humanity now globally. If you want to find out some intelligence, you have to go to China, you have to go to Russia, you have to go to Japan, you have to go to Korea, someplace like that. But keep away from the transatlantic region. They're all nuts.
Well, Lynn,
Yeah. Go
well,
ahead.
just quick. We had some discussion earlier that in terms of the American presidency and those presidents who have stepped forward in a time of crisis, such as, Lincoln, Roosevelt, and so on, Kennedy, that what made them, what was the strength of their soul to represent the policy that they stood for, which was always a fight against the British imperial policy, right? And so it wasn't this demagogue business, right, which is largely how Obama came on the scene. Everybody said, oh, what a great talker, although he didn't say anything, of course, but just was a great talker. And now we see that what he's actually stands for, which is we're on the verge of World War III, the economy is falling into off the cliff. But it's always been, in the real American presidency has been somebody who steps forward in a time of crisis, who actually has a policy and is willing to back up their policy, and that's what people move on.
The problem is I'm the only one who's qualified for that job, but I'm too old for it. It's a fact. No one else, as you know, what we did with the State of the Union report, there was no one else who could give that. There were no candidates who could give that kind of report, which is relevant. That is a truthful report, which is actually relevant. I'm the only one running, but I'm not running, who's qualified to be the President of the United States right now. So what we're looking for is a combination of people as a team who come together as a presidency, who agree on the program I set forth. The idea of saying you have issues which you vote on this issue, that issue, that issue. That is insane at this time, because there is a very limited number of things that you can do which will save this nation and civilization. And I've got them all. Now, what we're looking for really is we're trying to create a composite presidency where you have a team that is voted to become the presidency, in which they have an agreement, a programmatic agreement, exactly identical positions, even though they come from different backgrounds. No matter however the jobs are pointed out, who's the vice president, who's the president, who's this and who's that, they all have to have exactly the same thorough commitment. They can't have this guy believes this and that's nice, and this guy believes that, that's nice. No, that is insane. You must understand how grave this situation is. There's no one right now who's fit to be elected as president who's qualified legally to be a president. No one. You know what the problems are. There's no one who has a conception of all these issues. And they're all crucial. You can't drop one and say this one is good, but that one's bad, therefore I'll vote for this guy because he's good on this and good on this, but he's missing on this. You can't do it. This time you've got to have...
And the population knows that. They know that there's nobody out there that's fighting for their interests and that is competent to lead this nation. And it's true. You know, you go out, we're out in the field every day, we're talking to people, and everybody comes up and they say, my God, what are we going to do? You know, the Democratic Party is insane. And, you know, you have Democrats that say, I'm a Democrat, but this president is destroying the nation. But you have the Republicans on the other side, and it's just a complete mess with the Republican candidates. And so the population, they know that they've been sold down the scrap heap here. They have been, you know, put in second-class citizenship and the problem is that they accept it. And this is what we're talking about here, why the survival of this nation and mankind overall is that there can be no more talk about issues. And we were talking about this earlier, that, you know, even in the Democratic Party or in some of the circles around, you know, some of the top layers of the party and other places, people are saying, look, this whole thing about talking about issues, gay rights, abortion, everything else people want to talk about, whatever, outside of what reality is killing us. And they see it. So, I mean, it is that people are looking for leadership. They're looking for people to stand up and tell the truth. And they don't see that, especially represented by any of these current political candidates.
The problem is you guys are essentially, 6 of you right now, are what must be the image of the president. Because nobody else has the policies required, and even you guys don't have them perfected. Huh? That's the reality, and that's the way you have to approach this. You're not trying to look for somebody else besides yourselves to become president. You're looking for you as a team to become typified by a group of people who is going to become the president. That's the only chance this nation has. And you have to operate from this point on. Now you've gone through a couple of stages with these sessions we've had here so far. Now you've got to start shifting your gears. You've got to think of yourself as, in a sense, epitomizing a collective president. And you've got to present yourself on that basis. You say, we have this team of candidates and others we will draw in are going to create the presidency of the United States, because none of the above is qualified to be president. Not if you want a president who's going to play a role which saves this nation. So what you need is really a team. Now, you had something like that in the formation of the presidency of the United States in the first place. You had a bunch of people who came in. There were problems that arose over money and things like that. But you had a team that was actually, for a moment, under Washington and under the influence of Franklin, and particularly Franklin, you had a team of people who functioned as a presidency of the United States and solved the problems and created the Constitution. You don't have any candidates for president in recent times who have the qualification that the presidency had at the time Benjamin Franklin was shaping it. You don't have anything like that. You don't have a competent presidency from any source right now. I said I could do the job because you know what I'm talking about, the issues, what has to be done. But we don't have anybody who is running for president, and we have damn few people who are running for other office, in congressional office, who really has the qualifications, even a group of them, to be a president. They don't have it. You have people who have qualifications, excellent qualifications on this point, that point, this point, provided you have a presidency to make it tick. But the problem is you've got to think of yourself as a collective president, because you have to really, as together, to represent the campaign for the whole package which we've laid out. All the other things are less important. It's the package we have laid out, which I discussed essentially this past Wednesday. That's your program. That's the presidential program. And you have to, the six of you, have to be the spearhead of a campaign on behalf of that program. In the meantime, you have to think of yourself collectively as epitomizing a suitable president of the United States, because at least you know the package that has to be applied immediately to save the United States and to save civilization. And nobody out there has it. Nobody's running for office. Look at these Republicans. One or two of these guys might be qualified for something. They're not incompetent. They're intelligent, maybe wrong-headed, but they're intelligent. And they might be useful, especially in Congress or some position like that. But then none of them are qualified to lead this nation through this period of crisis now. And in terms of the electoral campaign, like you are, the six of you, have to be the epitome of what the leadership, the presidential leadership of the United States has to be. And you have to think in terms of a team of people who have a solid understanding of what needs to be done, and to set it forth and go out to the American people and say, this is what we can do for you. And don't believe anything else, because we don't know of anything else that can be done for you. And nobody else does either.
Well, Lynn, I think what you had done in terms of laying it out and the international response that, especially on the war, the opposition to this war drive that you led, right? A couple months ago, you laid it out very clearly that the British were going for World War III, that immediately upon the death of Gaddafi, they were going to rush into Syria and Iran with the intention of attacking Russia and China, setting up a thermonuclear showdown. And it's notable that at that time, Rogozin comes forward from Russia, puts on the Strategic Defense Initiative on the table, what he called the Strategic Defense of the Earth. And then just coming out of your last, State of the Union address, virtually a day later, the Russians are proposing, a copy of what you had put forward, that the U.S. and Russia should cooperate around putting a station on the moon, right, for further exploration beyond that. So you look at that period, and you see how much the world wants to move on these policies, and if that, in one sense, because of what you've done and what we represent, we can actually recruit not just a nation around these policies, but we're recruiting a nation to these policies which are already ready to go internationally.
Yeah, we have actually, to my knowledge, to my direct knowledge, we already have that elements of that agreement, particularly on the Asian side. They're varying degrees. We have it. What we need is an American slate, an American package, which does exactly the kind of thing I did this past Wednesday. And the six of you have to be that package, which does that. And whoever else we drag in on this thing as candidates. Huh? But that's got to be the package, because that's the only thing that will work. Any deviation, one slight deviation to put something else in there, which changes the flavor of the direction. Compromises cannot be allowed, because this system is ready to go down the sewer. You're not going to build step by step by increments. Because, for example, putting through Glass-Steagall, fine, you can put that through. Good. But you must immediately put through also the rest of the package, an actual credit system, not a compromise, a real credit system. It's going to be drastic because overnight, what are you going to do? You're going to drive a lot of people wild because you're going to bankrupt these guys from Boston and elsewhere who are the swindlers who are sitting on top of claims to money when they have nothing they've earned. They have gambling debts. And the gambling debts are greater than all the payments that we received. They're all bankrupt, and we're going to have to bankrupt them. We're going to take the parts of the banks that can be salvaged as commercial banks and similar kinds of institutions. We're going to protect them under Glass-Steagall. But that's not going to save the nation because we're on the verge of starvation and breakdown right now. Therefore, we must have this thing right through right away. We can't wait for it. We've got to have agreement to it this year. So you cannot go towards incremental influence on people. And the problem of the candidate is the candidate is trying to woo the voters. And when you try to woo the voters and you don't preempt the voters' opinion, you haven't made it. And if you're still wooing the voters, you're going to lose. So you have to get to a climax point where you've got them. And you want to get people who are totally committed on these issues that we have raised.
That's
totally
exactly
committed.
What President Roosevelt did. I mean, that's when you're talking about a presidency, that's a real presidency because there was no compromise. Roosevelt told the population what had to be done. He said, look, I'm going to tell you in very clear terms what has to happen if we're going to save this nation. And his fireside chats, how he organized the population, wasn't trying to capitulate to their feeling state or what they might think is important, or what they might think they need, but what had to be done. And he laid out the policies very clearly. And it wasn't just that we needed bankruptcy reorganization and then, as you're saying, go to the next step and we have this policy and that policy, but everything was laid out as one unified picture. And what people didn't understand, he said, look, you may not understand this, but I'm going to tell you why this is important for you and why you have to get behind this policy. And people trusted in him because they knew that he was acting in their interest. And it is true. We need candidates today that can go out. I mean, that's what we're doing. We have to go out and present this policy, and people, they're ready for it. We see it every day. They don't have anything else. People are losing everything. They're losing their homes. They're losing their ability to feed themselves and their children. And they're seeing the fact that there's no competent leadership out there. And when they see us presenting these very concrete solutions, they're ready to respond. They might be a little bit afraid at first because it's something different than they're talking about, but they don't see anyone else presenting any viable solutions. And so I think looking back at, thinking about what you're saying and thinking back to President Kennedy, he built that type of presidency. People working around him from Harry Hopkins that went in and, in the first 100 days, we sat down with a pot of coffee and a desk and just very little resources and started to map out the plans for what was needed to organize the nation around the needed recovery, and weren't worried about what was popular or what people were going to say. This just had to be done, and that's where we're at right now. What has to be done? Obama has to go. There can't be any compromises on it. We have to get Glass-Steagall through, but all of that has to be organized around what is the future mission for mankind that is going to be restored to this nation.
One of the key things you have to say, and I'm talking about you as well as some other individuals up there up front, the two are sitting beside me here. What you've got to say is what's important. You can't just approach this thing by getting the right points in. You've got to say, essentially, look, none of these guys who are running for president presently, or who seem likely to run for president presently, are fit to be president. So therefore, you don't have a single candidate out there running for president who's qualified to be president whose election would not be a menace to the existence of the United States right now. That's the point. There's a difference between trying to make your points and the point of knocking the other guy down, which I was doing the other day. Right? None of these guys are fit to be president. They're not fit. If there were no one else for president, they're still not fit. And you've got to be fit. And you've got to say, look, we, Mr. Friends of ours, we do have the commitment. We do care. As a group, we are qualified on policy. These guys are not qualified. The Republican slate is a dirty joke. The present candidacies for the presidency of the United States on the Democratic side is a joke, a dirty joke. And you guys are out there going to try to choose among these dirty jokes? Or do you want something that will work? Do you want somebody who can do it, who can deliver it, who's committed to it?
Well, then I'd like to bring something up on that point, because I think people do understand that these people are incompetent and they are, very hungry for the solution. And so when we are presenting what you laid out last week, they're very moved, especially when they get an idea that they can understand economics.
Yeah, right.
Because people are very, frustrated that we keep bailing this crap out when they know that there's no solution in sight with that. So they're frustrated. But if we bring up these notions of scientific principles of economy, such as energy flux density and what a Mars mission will do for the rest of the economy, then they can understand it. And just one, then they get excited because they see a tangible, light at the end of the tunnel.
But they're looking for commitment.
Mm-hmm.
What they're really looking for is commitment and competence. Two things. The first thing is commitment. If you're committed, they're going to be interested. If you say that you're committed, look, the problem is there's no one that I could in good conscience vote for president for now. There may be somebody hidden out there. But what's on the slate, nothing is qualified to be president. In fact, electing any of them would be a menace to the United States. We already have a menace to the United States in terms of the current president. These guys could be almost as bad. Right? So therefore, we need a presidency, which means a presidential candidate or president, and a group of people around that president as the national leadership who's going to ram this program through. And we're not going to lynch because somebody says, I have some money invested in Wall Street, and I have a right to have my money. You don't have a right to have your money. You already stole it, you damn fool. You made a gambling bet. You bet in a gambling house, and you lost. Nobody owes you anything, buddy. And that's when you get that clear across, I'm suggesting that you have to be not candidates. You have to be super candidates. Delivering the super candidate message. And I will do my job on this case to make sure that you have the information and the approach to deal with this thing as a candidacy. But the six of you, plus whatever we drag into this thing beyond, is going to be presented as, and everybody's going to know it, that these guys you're giving options for are no damn good. They're no good for your health. They swindled you already too much, didn't they? Or they either swindled you or they didn't do anything to save you from the swindlers. They all backed down to the swindlers. And you're trying to say you can represent something? Well, you can't be trusted. We gave you a chance year after year after year. And what did you do? Year after year, you made everything worse. Especially at the beginning, of the past decade. We've had, ever since George W. Bush Jr. came into office about a dozen years ago, everything has become worse. And what have the people done in the Congress to deal with this mess? They created it. At the end of the administration, the previous administration, everything was going down. Bill was coming out of the ropes. What he'd been put through, which was a fraud in itself, and nobody really defended him properly. So since that time, since Bill was put through the ropes on the impeachment charges, we have not had a president, nor had we had competent leadership in this country. And since Bill quit office or was out, Nothing good has happened. Maybe somebody here and there has tried to do something good as an issue, as a local issue, but we can't deal with a local issue. We have a danger to the entire nation right now, of the collapse and extinction of the entire nation. We have Europe, in continental Europe, Western and Central Europe, they don't even have nations anymore. They have burial grounds where former nations are now remembered. They're all part of this. They're all part of this mere puppets of the British system. They have nothing. So we're in a time where we have to make revolutionary changes. We have to get a system that's going to save this nation, and people like you have to do it.
Well, they're obviously terrified of our potential, which has yet to be fully realized, but just the threat of the slate with your leadership, because you have, for example, in my district, they tried to pay Congressman Rothman $2 million to run in that district against Scott Garrett, and he didn't want to, so he's not. Then I've announced now they're threatening to run a linebacker from the Giants football team against me in the Democratic primaries, and the same thing with Dave, and some, I understand, they literally are going to have legions of Democrats who are nothing but Obama Democrats to run against us in these campaigns to try and confuse the voters, and I think we can have a lot of fun with this.
Obama Democrats are not a marketable product.
I was actually at a Democratic a club event earlier this week where they were recruiting candidates to be running for local positions for the Democratic Party, and I said exactly that we have a slate of candidates because there are no qualified presidential candidates. And this was the group of people who were basically supposed to run the local Obama campaign, and they just went silent. They had no response, and I just signed in and quietly went in, and one by one, the candidates approached me and said, well, I don't agree 100% with you, but let's stay in touch because I'm interested in your policies. So I think the acknowledgement of that is more known than people are willing to admit at this point.
But the problem is that we've got to do that. We've got to do it exactly that. We've got to take charge. These guys who are being pulled in don't really know anything about the problems. They know the existence of problems, but they don't know about the problem, what the solutions are. They don't understand what the solutions are. They are capable of judging whether the result that you're promising is going to be worth something or not. That they can judge. That's a practical question for them. And they have some insights on some things. But the idea of going up against the national leadership is where they don't have it. And that's what we have to come across.
Right, it's cowardliness. And because this guy who I defeated in the 2010 election, his whole campaign right now, this is one of these Obama Democrats, his whole website is to expose me. He has no policies of his own. But the irony about it is after he goes through that I have the mustache on Obama and that we're calling for Obama's impeachment, he then goes on to proceed that he doesn't agree with Obama's policies. He didn't agree with the health care policy, and most of what Obama's done he doesn't agree with. So then you get back to this point that these guys don't have any solution, and they're being cowards, and they say, well, I have to support Obama because he's a Democrat and I'm a Democrat, and so that's just the right thing to do. When they know that this guy is not only destroying the Democratic Party, but he's a puppet of Wall Street. He's destroying the entire nation, and if he's not gone, then they're gonna say, what are they gonna say? I supported Obama in launching World War III. So yeah, the fact is that these guys are just cowards, and if they understood and really would fight against this president, they would see that the whole situation, the tables would be turned on this entire process.
Well, also, we had this discussion earlier, which is we have to go after these presidential candidates and these other candidates that have zero clue of what to do. Mm-hmm. But because of the last 40 years of the cultural decay of what happened with the baby boomer generation and going into decay culturally, and then of course now their children into even more depths of decay, that if you do not attack the cultural axioms and effectively, as a parent would give a spanking, although I don't suggest the boomers might get excited about spanking, but in terms of just going after their axioms and saying, look at what this has brought you, look at what monetarism has brought you, look at the cultural and collapse of the economy as you adhere to this monetarism, look at environmentalism, what it's brought to you, a complete destruction of any notion of the future and so on. So I think that we have to be very clear that we have to go directly at these axioms, directly at the cultural decay, since the death really of Kennedy as a key marker point. And as we're putting forward the policies, the future-oriented policies with the Mars program as the key driver, it has to be synonymous that yes, this is where we can go, but if you're not attacking the evil of the cultural decay, then it isn't going to matter. You have to hit that head on.
What you guys have to do, I'm emphasizing this, we can generate largely out of the basement crowd. Because, for example, we have NWAPA. Now we're on top of the NWAPA project from a scientific and other standpoint, because we're looking at it not just as NWAPA, a full NWAPA, yes, but we're also looking at the Arctic. And you cannot really deal with this problem without taking into account the Arctic. You've got to deal with the fact with Russia. Now we have an implicit offer of an alliance with Russia. This is what we're dealing with. We're talking with leaders in Russia about policies, and this is like pre-cooperation kind of thing. If we can get cooperation, we'll have it automatically. Things will begin to happen right away. We have things in other parts of the world like that, particularly on the Asian side, the Asian Pacific side. Things are wide open. We have a situation where in Europe, you see our little Italian campaign, which is not so little in terms of its impact, which in Italy, we have Greece is blowing out. We have Spain and Portugal are about to blow out. The French situation is impossible. We have a world situation. We have a map, and a lot of it is centered in the basement operation. We have a map of things that cohere that need to be done. What we really need is the funds, essentially, to produce the kind of video material which we can take around and park around with us everywhere we go with a full program. We need to develop right now, and we've got to find the funds to do it. We've got to produce a material which is the full package of the program. We've been rebuilding it, haven't we? Piece by piece. Now we've got to go to a new phase. You guys are ready to do it now.
Yeah, and just to say on that, we do have the government in the wings already. With NWAPA, we just completed a 3-day seminar right here with a whole array of experts from all over the country on every single element of what has to happen to build NWAPA, and they hashed the whole thing through. And we've got the entire team already assembled.
So, yeah, right. Now we've got to produce the videos.
Right.
We've got to produce the videos which contain the individual elements, but also the totality of the program.
Right.
So we're going to go out for an really independent campaign in this way. Not just going out to trying to start from the bottom and build your way from the bottom up. You've got to build your way from the top down. Mm-hmm. When you're few in number, you have to build from the top down, not the bottom up.
Lynn, one thing of note on what you're bringing up here, I think, is that from what you laid out in your State of the Union address, this 3-generation collapse of the U.S. culture, and then how to turn that around, the only way you could really do that is rip up the entire cultural degeneration of the United States, and the collapse in optimism in the U.S. would be a Mars mission. And I think that when you look at the grand scheme of things, what you're bringing up here with what the basement's working on, the scientific research they're looking at, when you start to look at the vastness of the galaxy and the universe, a short hop trip from the moon to Mars is like a small short trip compared to the vast galaxy we're looking at. 1 week. And it's short, but we're talking about a Crab Nebula, which isn't even that far from us when you get into that. And then you've got a whole other vast galaxy. And then we get outside of the galaxy, and I think that when we come at it in our own minds from that standpoint, then as you start to look at conveying this to the American people, it's very easy, because they want something bigger than what's being presented to them by all these candidates. There's nothing being presented to them. They want to get some sort of sense of a return to a John F. Kennedy mission, and that rings with people. They have to understand, I think, that we already have things in the making. That Russia already proposed the Bering Strait project, as we're bringing up here. Roscosmos, the space organization in Russia, they've already said, let's go to the moon, let's go to Mars, as we just talked about. These projects are ready to go now, but the news, as you said, you have to go to Russia, you have to go to China to get the news. None of this is getting out to the American people. And sometimes we can take for granted the fact that we know this, but then the people out there have to do it. So I think that there does have to be kind of a 1-2 punch in all of this. On the one hand, we have to go out with the courage, and we have to say, hey, Obama's got to go. We're going straight up against the Democratic Party. I'm running as a Democrat, but that doesn't mean I'm going to kiss the butt of the Democratic Party. And you have that courage. But then on the other hand, you say, here's what we're going with. Here's the positive mission. People respond to that, and they go, okay, I just got smacked twice, and not just once. And they respond to that kind of courageous activity. I think that's where we have to go.
You have to go further than that. Because you have 4 generations of degeneration in the United States. And you cannot come up with suggestions on point-by-point issues which you're going to succeed. Because the population, by and large, is demoralized. There's hardly a member of the Senate, maybe a few, maybe here and there, on some things which are strong. And we have, of course, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, in which you have some in the military who are strong on these issues. But the typical American, particularly the poor guy down there in the teenage level and a little bit, up to their early 20s, these guys have got nothing. They don't understand anything. They will respond to a suggestion on a particular point, and everybody will try to appeal to them on 1 or 2 points that they think they can sell them. What we have to do is preempt the situation. And we have to take an operation which is like a major military operation by a real command, like the way the United States went into a couple of wars. The military leadership went in with a full command, full plan. It was not a gradual long-term war plan. It was a finite policy to win a war and understand all the things that had to go together to win that war. And you presented just like what happened to me when I was walking the streets of Manhattan on December 7th, 1941. The president had held back on defending the United States against Japan because the American people in general were not ready to defend the United States up to that moment. It was only after the word of the attack on Pearl Harbor and the sinking of U.S. ships and so forth had occurred that in that same morning, 2 or 3 hours later, in Manhattan and elsewhere around the United States, you had a massive turnout of volunteers volunteering for military service. Before that, you would not have been able to mobilize an effective defense of the United States. The same thing applies here. You have a completely disoriented population. If you get a favorable response to them, it doesn't worth anything. You can't act on it. You see this. You talk to people on the streets. You can find all kinds of people who will agree with what we say. When you raise issues, they'll agree, but they won't do anything. The key thing in this is you've got to get a program where people are committed to doing something, not just talking about it or approving of something. Not giving a guy a chance to see if he can do something. You've got 3 generations of Americans who don't have the brains and guts in an organized form to rally to defend this nation against the kind of problems we face and the world. What we have to do is we have to go out there not by building on issues and appealing to support based on issues. We're going to take the space program the Mars program. We're not going to do any fooling around. We're going to say, look, this is not going to happen, and the full result is not going to happen immediately. Just like NASA's program of going to the moon did not happen immediately. Now this involves driving at what speed to make 1 week, a 1 week trial from the moon to Mars, with a crew and ship, everything in it, and getting back safely. It's by presenting that in a clear way that you will make people, startle people, and get them to think real, not to attract their sympathy, but foster their enthusiasm. Well, why the hell are we fooling around with this? What's going on with it? Well, we're going to build stations in tunnels on the moon. You know, there are tunnels in the moon. We're going to build up these tunnels in the moon. We're going to build up a baseline, because, you know, if you try to fly directly from the surface of the Earth to Mars, you got a problem, buddy. Mm-hmm. We can do it, but it's not very efficient. We can do it at this kind of speed. We can develop that capability. The capability exists. And we're going to show you now a film which shows you exactly what the outline is for this development of Mars. Now remember, this is not just a trip. We've got problems out there. We've got asteroids and things out there. We were missed. The Earth was missed one shot close to it. Could have destroyed the Earth and the people on it. We need defenses against asteroids. That's one thing we need. We also have other problems which we need help in. And we're going to have missions to places like Mars, which is the best way for us to run a mission of these types, which are necessary for us. And we can go with this program. It's feasible to go within 1 week from Moon to Mars and back. And that is by preempting the situation and not by making suggestions. And that's what I want, because I know that nothing else will work. We've got to present the case. I mean, we have limited resources, but we don't have too much intellectual limited resources. We can do better in that department than we can in some other physical department. And we can do this. But the fact is that humanity can reach Mars in some not great distant future, can reach Mars within a week by going out at full speed, halfway there, and backing down halfway there. 1 week. And we look at the missions we have, saving us against asteroids, which might blow the whole Earth out while Obama is still quacking away there. You've got to get these guys, hit them hard with a concept, because they all are so discouraged. They have no real mustering factor. This is as bad as what Roosevelt faced when he knew that there was going to be an attack on the United States. And there was actually a planned air attack on the United States from Germany, you know, at that period. So at this point where the United States people in the United States would not muster to defend the United States in that way, they would help out against the Hitler problem. It was that thing, Pearl Harbor. The Pearl Harbor thing changed everything. And we won. And the way we won, the losses we took, not only Guadalcanal, but on the islands, we took hard losses, but we won. And that's the situation we face. We got 16 to 17 million Americans out there fighting to save civilization. And we succeeded. We succeeded because we started with the intention to win. And what you have to do is get the intention to win on the part of the people, not try to coax them into accepting the idea of the project. You've got to convince them on a mass scale that this is exactly what we need. When you talk about jobs, talk about solving problems of other kinds, you need that kind of spirit and mobilization in the population. And to win this election and the way we have to win it, to recreate a new presidency which could save this nation, we've got to go all the way, not with suggestions, not with outlined proposals, but with motivating people to see this is the only thing that can be tolerated, as was the case in Pearl Harbor Day on December 7th. A sudden change. And we have to induce a sudden change in the temperament of the American people. A commitment to victory that won't quit. And even with this shot down and worn out American population, we can do it again. And that's what you have to do. And that's what we have to do. You have to save this nation from what is imminently right now. Right now, if we don't do anything, the United States is going to be destroyed and the people in it too. So it's about time we stop, fooling around with this also-ran, these nice suggestions, this influencing, peddling. We got to go in there and smash this thing wide open. And we can do it. And what we did, this past week, and presenting this case of the, which he presented, on one week to Mars, which is feasible. It's going to take some future time to do it. But once we make it clear that it can be done and must be done, then you're serious. Until that point, you're playing. And I think you're ready to get serious.
One idea on that, in terms of changing people's conceptions of what's possible on these asteroids, you brought up we can get to Mars. Well, we can change our with increases of energy flux density. It's not just a change to a higher watt amount of energy, but we can completely transform what's possible. Such as, for example, mining the moon and asteroids. With fusion, not only can we make Mars accessible, we can also be changing what's available to us as natural resources.
But you've got to startle the American citizen. You've got to startle them. You've got to startle them with no crap. It's got to be truthful, because you're putting everything on the line. And if you make a mistake and exaggerate, it's going to kick back. So you've got to have the program that is actually going to work, and present the program that will actually work, and push for that and nothing less than that. That's the whole point. That's winning war. The other thing is like long war, and we've had a lot of long war, like 10-year long wars, from which very few people return safely and sanely. But if we go at it the right way with the right information, the fact is that we do have, the United States, the world does have this. Russia has capabilities. Japan has capabilities. China has capabilities. China's going to the moon already. So this is, and Russia was getting ready to go to Mars with a team to fly to Mars. So doing this, but the real way to do it, yes, you can take the slow boat to Mars, and maybe within some time the people may come back not as sausages, but as human beings. Right? But with the 1 week program, you've changed everything. And the first thing, once you make that 1 week program, which you would probably do from an assembly on the moon, in the tunnel of the moon, and you put this thing out there, and it's 1 week, and that is the target which we as a nation, together with other nations who cooperate, must have. Our target is we want to demonstrate, we want to reach very soon as possible, the feasibility of 1 week to Mars and back, and 1 week back. We want that, which means we're probably going to do it through the moon, because of the factor of the gravitational factor is such you don't want to have to make the trip from Earth and then go somehow directly to Mars from there. It can be done, but it's not a good idea. Once you open up the tunnels in the moon, then you can start to build up the system, which can do the job much more nicely. And we just have to do that. We have to define that. It's possible. We have to define it. We have to prepare to do it. And the fact that we have demonstrated that we are preparing to do it and that it will work is what's going to change the mind of the American people and other nations as well. And you have to be the candidates who do that. And we have to get the programs going, which demonstrate the feasibility of this thing, and demonstrate. And we've got all this proof of why we need to go to space. You have the whole Russian point, the SDE program. We have to go into space to defend the Earth against the damn things. One of these big rocks hitting the Earth, and we're out of business. So that's a pretty good motive for doing the job.
So it's a two-step campaign, which is pull your head out of the dark place it is and look up.
Or something. No, but the point is, look, we've got a situation. There's 6 of you, right? There'll be more. But is that going to be enough to do the job? Is the propaganda to go with that going to be enough? No. You've got to go and break out. A real breakout. And you're ready to start doing it. I've been watching this over the past 3 weeks, right? You're ready to do it, to start it. We just got to get some more people activated and stop playing tiddlywinks with great politics. Don't make promises. You can make a nice suggestion. You hope somebody will follow. No, we're going to say we are going to insist that you live up to your obligation to save this nation, and we can do it. Here's how we can do it. And we have access to the people who know the technology, and we know ourselves something about the basic technology, which will do this. We know why this has to be done. So we're going to make all the way. We're not going to make a polite suggestion. We're going to have kick-ass all the way to the bone.
That's a good way to get there.
As you said, people living in the future is the key, and I don't think enough people do that. And what you're expressing is very powerful and also optimistic, because it's sometimes even with us ourselves. I think being there, taking people there, taking people's imagination there is very much a challenge. What does it mean to actually live in the future? And this Mars mission sets the precedent for that, like that the future is determining the present, and everything that we're presenting as policy is being governed by this mission. And it's not, baby steps, from one stage to the next. But when you think about this Mars mission, everything from the Arctic development to the NWAPA now becomes seen in a totally different light. And it's not just something that is gradually achieved, but this is, giant leaps for mankind that people have to get out of their state of how, I'm going to get past the next day and look much, much further into the prospects for the future and what they're really fighting for as a mission. And so that's something that just totally goes against the way that everybody is thinking about this whole process. And this Mars mission, brings the process into one unified idea for mankind.
Yeah. And you guys are going to do it. Like Bill, for example. Bill's got a whole bunch of neighbors out in his district, right, who are working in some very high technology machine tool capabilities. So the whole rest of them are out of jobs, but you have a certain selected group of veterans of these types of skills who do have these capabilities. And what you would think about immediately when you think of like a project like this, you're thinking about drawing people like that into this kind of project building. Yeah. That's exactly what we need. So we're thinking about recruiting, how we're going to recruit the labor force, which is going to implement the kind of job that has to be done. We will have, from Russia, we'll have the capability of the scientific cooperation on what they know and what they can do. China will be more difficult to deal with. Japan, we certainly know how to deal with. Korea, which has some very fine technology there. We're going to be opening up that side of the Pacific for major work. Russia and other countries will be involved in that. So we have the perspective of a shock wave effect, like what Roosevelt intended and what Roosevelt's experience taught us, of turning this world around, cancel all this worthless garbage debt, get people back to work, dig out the skills that are needed where they exist for great projects which will revive the economy, and in the middle of that, take a driver program, like the SDE, which Russia came up with. Take a driver program and a Mars mission orientation and a great weather system. We don't know how to deal with the weather yet. We're getting into very dangerous galactic conditions, and we have to learn how to deal with these things. So start getting people to think about how they are not looking for a job. They're looking for the moral satisfaction of making a contribution to the future of humanity. And that's the way we organized for World War II and for the Roosevelt movement. We can do it again. But you have to think of yourselves, of the people who can do that, and get other people involved in thinking that way. That's what we need. I think you're ready to do it. You just have to think another week and go at it some more.
Okay.
Next week you'll be in better shape, and the week after that you'll be prime shape. I mean it. I'm serious about that.
We know.
Good. Okay. I think we've got a lot of work to do. So thanks for joining us, and stay tuned to LPAC TV.